Welcome back, everybody. Ready to dive into something pretty fascinating.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, well, let's take a trip back in time to the dawn of personal computing, like before anyone even really knew what that meant.
Sounds exciting.
Oh, it is, trust me. And we've got a front row seat to the action through Bill Gates' own words. We're going deep into his book back to 1974 when he was just a student at Harvard.
Harvard Bill Gates. The stories are almost legendary. Did the reality match up?
Well, that's what we're going to find out. Let's unpack some of those experiences and see what they tell us about his journey to becoming, well, Bill Gates.
Great idea. Where do we start?
Let's start with his approach to classes. I mean, this wasn't your typical college student. Bill intentionally overloaded his schedule, like way more classes than anyone else.
Oh, I've heard about this. He strategically skipped lectures for subjects he knew he could cram for later.
Exactly. And he used that extra time to sit in on other courses that really grabbed his attention. You know, stuff that wasn't even on his official course list.
So he was already kind of hacking the system back then.
Absolutely. His official major was applied math, but he used it as a springboard to explore all sorts of things. Linguistics, criminal justice, economics, even British history.
Wow, that's quite a range. He was basically creating his own personalized curriculum before that was even a thing.
And it gets even better. During finals week, his friends actually thought he'd walked into the wrong exam room.
You're kidding.
Nope. Turns out Bill was just playing it cool, you know, adding to that whole aura of effortless brilliance he had going on.
Oh, that's classic. Makes you think, though, was he deliberately downplaying his efforts while secretly outworking everyone else?
I think so. It's a recurring theme with Bill Gates. It makes you wonder if it was strategic, a way to stand out from the pack, you know?
Definitely adds to the mystique. It's like he was already playing a different game than everyone else.
Totally agree. And speaking of playing games, we can't forget about Bill's legendary poker nights. He was a regular in these high-stakes games with some seriously sharp minds, mostly math and science guys.
So not just your casual dorm room card game.
Oh no, not at all. These were hardcore. The stakes kept getting higher, and they even moved the games off campus at some point.
He must have been pretty good to hold his own in that crowd.
He did well at first, but eventually realized he wasn't quite at the level of the real poker sharks. Still, he was drawn to the intellectual challenge of it all. It's like he saw poker as another arena to test his mental agility.
Yeah, I see that.
And then, boom, he loses almost all his winnings, like $1,800 in a single night.
Ouch.
That experience made him step back and realize that even his poker skills had limits. I think it reveals something interesting about his approach, though. He's competitive, for sure, but not reckless, willing to take risks, but smart enough to know when to fold.
That's a great observation. It definitely foreshadows his later approach to business. He always seemed to strike that balance between calculated risk and knowing when to walk away.
Right. And there's another experience worth exploring. His experimentation with LSD with Paul Allen. It was a different time back then. Experimentation was pretty common, but still.
Yeah, it's Bill Gates,
Right. And he mentions in his book that he had this fleeting thought about deleting all his memories during that experience. Pretty wild, huh?
It definitely makes you think. It kind of speaks to this fascination he had, even then, with the power of technology to influence even our very being. A theme that would become central to his work later on, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We need to talk about Paul Allen. He was really a key figure in Bill's journey. Think of him as Bill's partner in crime at Harvard and a constant source of ideas. They'd already started a venture together called Trafo Data, and Paul would be the one to really push Bill towards the potential of, you know, microprocessors.
Right, because Paul was totally captivated by the possibilities of this new Intel 8080 chip. He envisioned building a whole computer company, maybe even a time-sharing service for regular people.
Yeah, and Bill was initially more hesitant about hardware because of the difficulties they'd faced with Trafo Data. He was convinced that software was the real key to innovation. It's interesting how their strengths complemented each other.
Definitely. And you have to remember, this was a time when the academic world was pretty dismissive of microcomputers. When Bill pitched his software ideas to a Harvard professor, the response was basically, "Oh, those are just toys, kid. Focus on your real studies." Can you imagine?
It's amazing how often established institutions miss the boat on revolutionary technologies, isn't it? Microcomputers were seen as gadgets for hobbyists, not the foundation for, well, everything we do today.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it. But Bill and Paul, they saw something different. They saw potential.
And then things get really interesting. Picture it, a snowy December day in 1974. Bill's in his dorm room and Paul bursts in waving the latest issue of Popular Electronics.
And on the cover, what do they see? The Altair 8800, boldly proclaimed as the world's first mini-computer kit to rival commercial models.
Wow, so this was it, the moment everything changed.
You could say that. And get this, the price, $397. About the same as a color TV back then.
So not exactly pocket change, but suddenly a computer was within reach for, well, regular people, not just giant corporations and universities.
Exactly. I mean, it was still pretty clunky and not exactly user-friendly, but it captured the imaginations of a lot of hobbyists. This is the beginning of personal computing.
It's hard to imagine now, but this Altair was a far cry from the computers we use today. You programmed it with toggle switches, for heaven's sake, flipping them up and down for ones and zeros, and the output, rows of blinking LED lights.
I know, it's like trying to write a novel with smoke signals.
Yeah.
But that's what makes their story so incredible. They saw beyond those limitations, They recognized the revolutionary potential of this, frankly, kind of clunky machine.
Paul actually said, it's happening without us. It was like a challenge, a call to action.
Oh, they were definitely up for the challenge. But there was a problem. They didn't have an Altair to work with, not even the Intel 8080 chip that powered it. So how do you write software for a computer you don't even have?
That's where their ingenuity comes in. Paul, always the innovator, figures out how to use Harvard's giant mainframe computer, a PDP-10, to simulate the 8080.
Whoa, hold on. So they were tricking a $1 million machine into acting like a $400 hobbyist computer. That's genius.
It was a brilliant workaround. It gave them a way to develop and test their code. And probably more importantly, it meant they had a significant head start.
Because they were pretty sure nobody else had even thought of doing this. They were in a race, even if they didn't know exactly who they were racing against.
Their goal was to develop a BASIC interpreter for the Altair. BASIC was a programming language that was designed for beginners, so perfect for, the emerging hobbyist market. But fitting it into the Altair's limited memory was a huge challenge.
Oh, I bet.
But Bill's earlier experience, remember he used to code in his head while hiking? Well, that gave him confidence that it could be done, but they couldn't do it alone.
And that's where Monty Davidoff enters the picture, right?
Yeah.
This freshman math whiz who just happened to overhear Bill and Paul struggling with this floating point math problem they were stuck on.
And he just casually says, hey, I can solve that. Just like that. It's a real sliding doors moment.
I love those. So now the team is complete. They're pulling all-nighters, fueled by caffeine and that thrill of being on the cutting edge of something totally new.
The energy must have been incredible. You can really sense the urgency in Bill's account of this time. They were convinced that others were on their tail, determined to be the first to deliver BASIC for the Altair.
And remember, this was way before the internet. There's no Stack Overflow to search, no online forums for help. They were flying blind, relying on intuition and sheer grit.
It's amazing how much they accomplished with such limited resources. There were constant challenges, too. At one point, Bill realized they didn't even have the technical specs for how to connect a teletype to the Altair.
Well, that's kind of important if you want people to actually use your BASIC interpreter.
Exactly. So Bill, just casually calls up the Altair engineer and asks for the input output details, like it's no big deal.
What'd the engineer say?
You're the first guys to ask that. That's when they knew they were way ahead of everyone else. After a few weeks of intense coding, their BASIC interpreter was more or less ready. Wasn't perfect, but it worked. And speed was key.
Right. So Paul hops on a plane to Albuquerque with their precious code on a paper tape. I mean, can you imagine? The hopes and dreams of an entire industry tucked away in a briefcase.
Talk about pressure.
And then on the plane, Paul realizes they forgot to write the bootstrap loader.
The what?
The bootstrap loader. It's a tiny piece of code that tells the Altair to actually load and run their BASIC program. Essential, basically. So there he is, scribbling out these crucial instructions on a notepad, thousands of feet in the air.
Wow, that's cutting it close. So what happens at MIT's headquarters?
Well, the moment of truth finally arrives. They load up the Altair with a whopping 6K of memory, which was a lot back then.
I bet. I can only imagine the tension in the room as they feed the paper tape into the reader.
It took 7 minutes for the program to load. 7 minutes. That must have felt like an eternity. And then, nothing. Their BASIC, the culmination of all that work, just sat there.
Oh, no. What did they do?
They decided to try again. And this time, something magical happens. The Altair springs to life, and a prompt appears on the screen. Memory size.
Like the computer was saying, okay, I'm awake, what now?
Exactly. And Paul, never one to miss a dramatic moment, types in a few basic commands just to prove that it works. And then, the moment that will go down in history, he types print 2 plus 2. The Altair whirs and computes, and the answer appears on the screen, 4.
Wow, what a moment.
A simple calculation, but it represented something monumental. It was the birth of personal computer software.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. What if they'd never seen that issue of Popular Electronics, Or what if they had listened to that professor who told Bill that microcomputers were just toys?
Right. What if? Would the personal computer revolution have still happened? Would it have happened differently? It's fascinating to think about.
Definitely. But the reality is, they were there, Bill and Paul, at the right time, with the right mix of skills and vision, and they just went for it.
They really did. And it's incredible how something as seemingly simple as a basic interpreter running on this, kind of clunky machine ended up laying the foundation for the world we live in today, the software-driven world.
Right. Like, think about it. Those lines of code, painstakingly written in a probably cold computer lab, they eventually led to the operating systems that run on, billions of devices now,
Yeah.
and the applications that connect us across the globe. It all goes back to that moment.
And that's a powerful reminder that the most transformative innovations often have these really humble beginnings. I mean, who could have predicted that all of this would come from that one moment?
So let me ask you this. Imagine you're back in that room in Albuquerque, right? You're watching this unfold. What would you have imagined was possible? What dreams would you have dared to dream about what this could become?
Wow, what a thought. It reminds us that we're all a part of this continuing story, this story of innovation. And the future, well, it's being written right now by people like Bill and Paul, but also by people like us and you listening.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, isn't it? We explore the past, we see how it connects to now, and we get to think about what the future might hold. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries.